Late night draped over Atlanta like a thick, heavy curtain, the streets hushed except for the occasional passing car, its headlights slicing through the darkness before vanishing into the void. Maya Holloway, a federal analyst, was driving home after a grueling day, her mind still tangled in reports, meetings, and the ceaseless calculations that had occupied her for hours. The cool leather of the steering wheel pressed against her palms, her fingers moving absently, her body on autopilot while her thoughts drifted. The soft hum of jazz filtered through the car's speakers, a steady rhythm that usually helped her unwind, but tonight, it barely registered. The city, despite its size, felt eerily still, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to relax, the quiet offering a fleeting sense of calm. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Red and blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror, flashing in rhythmic pulses that shattered the darkness. Her stomach clenched, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. She knew how these things went. Keeping her face neutral, she flicked on her turn signal, gradually slowed down, and pulled over to the shoulder, the tires crunching softly against the pavement. Hands visible. Movements slow. Breathing steady. A routine drilled into her since she was old enough to understand what stops like these meant for people who looked like her. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate, the kind of walk that belonged to someone who wanted to be noticed, someone who expected obedience. A shadow stretched across her window as the officer loomed beside her car. He didn't introduce himself, didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, his hand extended, palm up, as if her compliance was automatic. "License and registration," he said, his voice flat, practiced. She turned her head slightly, studying him in the dim glow of the streetlights. His badge caught the faintest glint, Crawford. It didn't mean anything to her, but she had seen men like him before. Keeping her movements slow and measured, she reached for the glove compartment, retrieved her documents, and handed them over. His fingers brushed hers as he took them, but he didn't look at them immediately. Instead, he took a half step back, his gaze flicking over her vehicle with the lazy scrutiny of someone looking for a reason to escalate. "Tail lights out," he finally said, tossing the words out like a casual accusation. Maya frowned, not visibly, but in the quiet space of her mind. That wasn't possible. The car had been serviced 2 weeks ago, every light checked. But arguing wasn't an option. She simply nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "I see." The pause. A shift in his stance. He wasn't satisfied with how easily she accepted his reasoning. That was the game, wasn't it? Push until she gave him a reason to push back harder. "Step out of the vehicle," Crawford ordered, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Maya's pulse remained steady, but her muscles tensed. She didn't move right away. "May I ask why?" Her voice was calm, controlled. She already knew the answer. Crawford exhaled sharply, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth, but there was no humor in it. "Because I said so." She let the silence stretch just long enough for him to feel it, long enough for the unspoken power play between them to take shape. Then, finally she reached for her seatbelt, unfastened it, and pushed open the door, stepping out into the cool night air. It brushed against her skin, but the tension in her shoulders kept her from feeling it. Crawford didn't move right away. Instead, he took a step back, eyes scanning her, assessing, deciding. She wasn't looking for a fight, but she also wasn't about to let him intimidate her. "Turn around, hands on the car," he said. And that was when she knew, this was never just about a tail light. Maya doesn't argue, doesn't raise her voice, doesn't move too quickly or too slowly. She knows how this works, knows the delicate balance between appearing compliant and not inviting further escalation. The law is on her side, but law means nothing when a man like Crawford decides it doesn't apply. She keeps her posture straight, her breathing steady, and her voice controlled as she speaks, asking for an explanation. There is no aggression in her tone, no defiance, only the simple expectation of an answer. But Crawford isn't interested in explanations, isn't interested in fairness, isn't interested in anything other than control. His silence stretches between them, thick and deliberate, his expression unreadable except for the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, a smirk barely contained, like he's waiting for an excuse, daring her to give him one. And then he moves. The handcuffs appear without warning, the metallic clink of metal filling the space between them before she even has time to react. The muscles in her back tense, her fingers flex unconsciously, but she doesn't resist. She doesn't flinch. He doesn't care. His hand clamps around her wrist, rough and unyielding, his grip firm enough to bruise. "Are you resisting?" The words aren't a question, they're a preemptive strike, a declaration of guilt before she's even had a chance to respond. His fingers tighten, pulling her forward, twisting her arm behind her back before she can adjust to the shift in weight. Pain shoots through her shoulder, sharp and immediate, but she grits her teeth, keeps her face neutral. He wants a reaction, but she refuses to give him one. The handcuffs snap into place, too tight, the ridges biting into her skin, the pressure unforgiving. She's been through training exercises, knows the difference between restraint and punishment, and this is punishment. Crawford jerks her wrist upward just enough to make his point, just enough to let her know that he enjoys this. She exhales slowly through her nose, lets the pain settle, lets herself absorb the reality of the situation. She knows this game, knows that compliance doesn't always mean safety, but she plays along because it's the only option she has. Crawford shoves her forward, guiding her toward the patrol car with none of the care he might show a suspect he actually believed to be dangerous. His hand presses against her back, his fingers pressing into her shoulder blade, steering her like she's nothing more than an object, a problem to be relocated. The door swings open, the hard plastic seat inside waiting for her like a prison cell on wheels. He doesn't ease her in, doesn't bother with basic human decency, he pushes. The momentum forces her to catch herself before she can hit the other side, the cuffs forcing her shoulders into an awkward position, discomfort blooming into something worse. The door slams shut behind her, sealing her in, cutting her off from everything but the sound of her own breath and the hum of the police radio crackling in the background. Crawford rounds the front of the car at his own pace, casual, unbothered, the kind of confidence that only comes with knowing he'll face no consequences. He slides into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirror, whistling under his breath as if this is nothing more than routine. The car jerks forward, pulling away from the curb, the city blurring past the window in streaks of neon and shadow. The radio plays some classic rock song, tinny through the speakers, and Crawford taps his fingers against the wheel, the picture of a man who has done this before, who will do it again, who sees no difference between what's right and what he can get away with. The sound of his whistling grates against her nerves, but she remains silent, watching the road ahead, measuring every second. The drive stretches longer than it should, the weight of the night pressing in from all sides, the tension thick enough to suffocate. Crawford doesn't look at her, doesn't acknowledge her presence beyond the occasional glance in the mirror, but there's satisfaction in the set of his jaw, in the way his shoulders relax as if this is exactly where he expected her to be. And then it happens. The radio crackles, static breaking through the monotonous hum of background noise, followed by a voice, sharp, urgent. "Officer Crawford, stand down." Repeat, "Stand down from the detainee immediately." The shift is instant, a ripple of tension that rolls through his body like a wave. His fingers tighten around the wheel, his foot hesitates on the gas, and for the first time since the stop began, he looks unsettled. He doesn't respond, doesn't reach for the radio, doesn't acknowledge the order at all. Instead, his grip hardens, his jaw clenches, and his eyes darken as he presses his foot down harder on the gas, the engine growling in protest. Maya watches him through the rearview mirror, sees the way his confidence falters, the way the cracks begin to form in his carefully constructed arrogance. Someone is watching. Someone knows. And Crawford doesn't like it. The moment Maya steps into the precinct, she notices it. Something has shifted. The air is different, thick with an energy that wasn't there before. Officers exchange glances, movements are sharper, tenser, voices hushed but urgent. It's subtle, but she's trained to read between the lines, to recognize when control has been pried from someone's grip. Crawford, who had spent the entire ride radiating smug satisfaction, is no longer at ease. His jaw is tight, his nostrils flare slightly, his fingers twitch at his sides. Something happened. Someone called. Someone important enough to make even a man like him uneasy. She doesn't know who, But she knows this is far from over. They process her like they would any suspect, cold efficiency masking the discomfort now rippling through the room. A fingerprint scan, a mugshot, a signature on a document she barely looks at before it's shoved back into a file. The officer at the desk avoids her gaze, his hands moving stiffly, as if he wants no part in this anymore. The phone on the wall rings, and the desk sergeant picks up, listens, and then his spine straightens. He cuts his eyes toward Crawford, who doesn't look back but clearly knows the call is about him. The sergeant mutters something short, clipped, then hangs up without another word. Silence stretches for a beat too long. And then the door swings open. A tall figure steps inside, his presence slicing through the tension like a blade. Elijah Green. He moves like he owns the room, like he was born to command attention, and right now, he's not here to ask for anything, he's here to take what belongs to him. His suit is sharp, his expression sharper, and when he locks eyes with Maya, she sees it immediately, he already knows everything. He doesn't waste time, doesn't bother with pleasantries, doesn't even look at Crawford before saying, "She's leaving." Now. The way he says it is final, unquestionable, like gravity itself is bending to his will. Crawford finally turns, eyes burning with barely concealed rage, but there's something else beneath it now, something that looks an awful lot like fear. He clenches his fists, steps forward like he might argue, but stops himself just before opening his mouth. His nostrils flare again. He glances at the sergeant, at the other officers still pretending they're not watching. He knows he's lost this round. But he's not done. Not yet. His lips curl back in something that isn't quite a smile, his voice low and sharp. "You don't know who you're messing with," he mutters, his words slicing through the air between them. Maya doesn't blink, doesn't flinch, doesn't acknowledge the threat, because that's exactly what he wants. Instead, she just watches him, committing every detail of this moment to memory. Her cuffs come off a second later. The metal slides away from her wrists, leaving behind angry red marks, but she doesn't rub them. She doesn't give him the satisfaction. Elijah doesn't touch her, doesn't guide her toward the exit, because she doesn't need guiding. She walks out on her own, her head high, her steps even, not a single glance backward. But she feels it, the weight of Crawford's stare, the heat of his anger boring into her back like a brand. She's free, but this isn't over. It's just beginning. The night air is cool, sharp against her skin, grounding her in the present. The moment the precinct doors close behind them, Elijah exhales, shoving his hands into his pockets. "That was too close," he mutters, but she barely hears him. Her mind is already turning, already calculating. Crawford's reaction wasn't just personal, it was practiced. That wasn't the first time he had pulled something like this, and it wouldn't be the last. "We need to find out who else he's done this to," she says, and Elijah nods, because he was thinking the same thing. The first step is easy. Public records, old case files, complaints that never went anywhere. But she knows that won't be enough. Crawford has been in the system too long, protected by too many layers. If they want to bring him down, they need more than just numbers on a page. They need a pattern. They need proof. And they need someone on the inside. And then it happens. A single notification on her phone, an email with no sender, no subject, just a single attachment, a folder labeled Crawford, internal reports. No explanation. No name. Just pages upon pages of misconduct, buried complaints, falsified reports. Someone is watching. Someone wants her to know the truth. Someone inside the department wants Crawford to burn. Maya knows the moment she opens the files that this isn't just about her. Page after page, report after report, the same pattern emerges. Traffic stops for minor infractions, fabricated reasons for escalation, unlawful arrests, falsified reports, excessive force. Different names, different dates, but always the same officer. Crawford's signature is on too many of them, his handwriting scrawled across documents that should have never been approved, his record a carefully curated lie hidden beneath the weight of bureaucracy. Some of the reports have been buried, complaints dismissed with vague explanations, but others show settlements, quiet payoffs to victims who never got their day in court. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a system that has allowed men like him to thrive, unchecked, unchallenged, untouchable. But not anymore. She doesn't waste time. She copies the files, encrypts them, sends a secured batch to Elijah and a second to a trusted journalist, a woman named Dana Westbrook who has been covering police misconduct for years. They meet in a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes, her laptop open between them, the glow of the screen reflecting in Dana's sharp, calculating gaze as she scrolls through the documents. "This is bad," Dana mutters, fingers tapping rapidly as she reads, her expression darkening with every line. Maya waits, watching, knowing what's coming. "But it's not enough," Dana finally says, closing the laptop. "We can't just throw this out there. We need more witnesses, victims willing to talk, something undeniable." Maya expected this, but the weight of it still settles heavily in her chest. The truth isn't enough. Not yet. The first sign that Crawford knows she's digging comes 2 nights later. She's locking her front door when she notices it, a small, rusted object lying on the welcome mat, positioned deliberately like an offering. A broken handcuff. One half snapped clean, the other still intact, a silent message in cold steel. Her stomach tightens, her mind sharpens, but she doesn't touch it. Instead, she takes a photo, sends it to Elijah with a simple message. He knows. The next day, the real pressure starts. A knock at the door, loud, authoritative, insistent. She opens it to find 3 officers standing in formation, their expressions unreadable, their posture stiff with the kind of control that only means one thing. They're here to send a message. "Routine check," one of them says, flashing a warrant before she can speak, stepping inside without waiting for permission. She watches as they move through her space, opening drawers, rifling through papers, scanning for anything they can use against her. It's legal, but just barely. They don't expect to find anything. That's not the point. The point is intimidation. The point is reminding her that they can enter her world whenever they want. The point is to make her afraid. She refuses to give them the satisfaction. She stands still, silent, watching as they tear through her home with calculated efficiency. They leave after 20 minutes, nothing gained, nothing taken, but their message delivered loud and clear. She barely sleeps that night. The broken handcuff, the fake search, the knowledge that Crawford isn't acting alone, all of it sits in her chest like a weight pressing down, a warning she can't ignore. But it only strengthens her resolve. She doubles down, pushes harder, starts reaching out to the victims from the reports, listening to their stories, collecting their words, building a case stronger than any single file. And then, 2 days after Dana publishes the first article, just a cautious expose, a hint of what's coming, Maya wakes up to the acrid scent of smoke. Her mind takes a second to process it before instinct kicks in. She throws back the blankets, feet hitting the floor as she stumbles toward the hallway. The glow outside her window isn't the soft warmth of streetlights. It's fire, flickering orange against the darkness, growing, spreading. She barely has time to grab her phone before the sound of glass shattering fills the night, the heat pressing against the walls, suffocating, smothering. She races to the front door, throws it open, the cool air hitting her like a slap as she gasps for breath, heart pounding. Neighbors are already outside, shouting, dialing 911, pointing at the flames licking the edges of her porch, creeping toward the front windows. Someone pulls her back as sirens wail in the distance, as firefighters rush in, as the blaze is beaten down and smothered before it can consume everything. But the damage is done. The air is thick with smoke, the charred remains of her front door still smoldering. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This was war. The video explodes online like wildfire, spreading across social media in minutes, reaching every corner of the internet before the department even has time to react. The footage is undeniable. Crawford's aggression, Maya's calm compliance, the unnecessary escalation, the moment the cuffs dig into her wrists, the smug smirk on his face as he shoves her into the car. There is no room for interpretation, no space for excuses, no way to spin the narrative in his favor. People are furious. The comment sections flood with outrage, the hashtags multiply, and the public demands answers. News outlets pick up the story, amplifying the pressure, demanding statements, but the police department remains silent, hoping it will all blow over. It doesn't. It only gets worse. By the next morning, Crawford is officially placed on administrative leave. Not fired, not charged, just temporarily removed from duty, a hollow attempt to pacify the storm raging outside their doors. It's a move straight from their playbook. Stall, wait, let the public's attention shift to the next scandal, and quietly reinstate him when the dust settles. But Maya isn't about to let that happen. She knows this is a performance, a calculated move to make it seem like accountability exists when in reality, it's nothing more than a delay tactic. She's seen it before. This time, she refuses to let them get away with it. Then, something unexpected happens. Two former officers reach out, anonymously at first, their voices cautious, their words chosen carefully, but their message is clear. Crawford isn't just a bad cop. He's a protected one. They have stories, details, first-hand accounts of misconduct that stretch back years, cases that were buried, complaints that vanished, lives that were ruined because he knew he could get away with it. They talk about quotas, about unwritten rules, about how the system shields men like him while destroying the people who dare to speak out. One of them mentions a case from 5 years ago, an arrest that turned violent, a complaint that was filed, an internal review that mysteriously disappeared. The other mentions surveillance footage that was accidentally erased, a pattern of selective memory loss that conveniently erased evidence whenever Crawford was involved. Maya listens, records, documents every word. She takes the information to activists, people who have spent years fighting against the same machine she's now up against. They know how to apply pressure, how to force a response, how to turn a moment into a movement. They strategize, plan protests, draft petitions, mobilize legal teams. This is no longer just about her arrest. It's about every person who has ever been in her position, about every voice that was silenced, about making sure that this time, the system doesn't get to bury the truth. They tell her she's not alone. She wants to believe them. And then the retaliation comes. Elijah is attacked outside his office late at night, caught off guard as he reaches for his car door. A figure in a hoodie moves fast, too fast, a strike to the ribs, a second to the jaw, the unmistakable sound of a bone breaking under the weight of impact. He goes down hard, his phone skidding across the pavement, blood pooling in his mouth before he can even process what's happening. The attacker doesn't rob him, doesn't take his wallet, doesn't even bother hiding what this is. A warning. A message. Stay out of it. Maya gets the call from the hospital, her stomach turning to ice as she listens to the doctor list his injuries. Concussion, fractured ribs, a split lip that needed stitches. He's stable, but shaken. When she sees him, bandages wrapped around his torso, his face swollen and bruised, something inside her snaps. This isn't just about exposing Crawford anymore. This isn't just about justice. This is personal. She's done playing by their rules. Maya doesn't hesitate. She doesn't wait for permission, doesn't ask for approval, doesn't let fear dictate her next move. She goes live. The camera captures her face, steady and determined, the weight of the last few weeks carved into the hard lines of her expression. This isn't just about her anymore, hasn't been for a long time. She speaks, voice unwavering, recounting every detail of her arrest, every threat, every attempt to silence her, but she doesn't stop there. She pulls out the files, the names, the cases buried beneath bureaucracy and corruption, the people who never had a chance to fight back. She tells their stories. She names names. She makes sure that no one watching can look away. The comments flood in, thousands of people listening, sharing, demanding answers. The news picks it up within minutes, clips spreading like wildfire. There is no containing this anymore. Then the message comes. It's encrypted, untraceable, nothing more than a few lines of text from an unknown number. You're looking at the wrong target. Crawford isn't working alone. If you really want to take him down, follow the money. Attached is a single file, a list of names, judges, prosecutors, high-ranking officers. People with power. People with something to lose. People who have been keeping Crawford safe for years. Maya's blood runs cold as she scans the list, recognizing some of the names instantly, realizing just how deep this goes. This isn't just about a bad cop. This is a system designed to protect men like him, to bury the truth before it can ever reach the light. And now, someone inside that system wants her to know. The pressure becomes too much for the department to ignore. Under the weight of public outrage, the media frenzy, and growing political tension, they have no choice but to act. An internal investigation is launched, a formal inquiry into Crawford's arrests, his disciplinary history, his connection to dismissed cases. It's a start, but Maya knows better than to celebrate. Investigations are slow, full of loopholes and bureaucratic delays, designed to drag on until the public loses interest. She won't let that happen. She pushes harder, demands transparency, forces them into the spotlight where they can't afford to stall. And Crawford knows it. He's losing control, losing the protection he's relied on for years, losing the fear that once kept people quiet. He doesn't lash out directly, not yet, but Maya can feel the shift, the way his tactics change. The threats don't come from him anymore. They come in whispers, in shadowed warnings from people who don't want to be involved but know too much to stay silent. They come in the form of intimidation, unmarked cars idling outside her home, anonymous calls in the middle of the night, the slow, creeping reminder that no matter how much ground she gains, he's still out there, still watching, still waiting for his chance to strike. Then it happens. One of the witnesses, a man who had agreed to testify against Crawford, goes missing. He had been careful, had taken precautions, had changed his routine, but none of it mattered. He never showed up for work, never answered his phone, never returned home. His family reports him missing, but no one expects him to be found alive. And they're right. The next day, his body turns up in an abandoned lot, a bullet in his chest, his phone wiped clean. No witnesses, no suspects, just a single message painted on the pavement beside him in red spray paint. Stay quiet. Maya sees the picture before the news even breaks. It's sent to her directly, no words, no sender, just the image staring back at her through the glow of her screen. A warning. A promise. A declaration of war. She grips the phone tighter, jaw clenching, heart pounding, because now she knows exactly what she's up against. And she isn't backing down. The pressure is too intense, the outcry too loud, the evidence too damning. The district attorney's office has no choice but to step in, forced into action by the weight of public demand and political scrutiny. But the wheels of justice move slowly, deliberately, designed to wear people down, to stretch cases thin until they collapse under the weight of bureaucracy. Crawford isn't behind bars yet. He's still out there, still watching, still waiting for the moment when everything turns in his favor. The system is built for men like him, and he knows it. Every delay, every postponed hearing, every procedural obstacle is a calculated move, a reminder that justice isn't about truth, it's about endurance. Maya doesn't flinch. She keeps pushing, keeps showing up, keeps making sure his name stays in the headlines, refuses to let the public forget what he's done. Then the break comes. Another anonymous message, another piece of the puzzle dropped right into her hands. This time, it's not a file, not a report, not another buried complaint. It's recordings. Crisp, clear, undeniable. Phone conversations between Crawford and his superiors, discussions about handling arrests, about making problems disappear, about how some people needed to be put in their place. There's laughter in his voice, the same arrogance that was in his smirk the night he threw her in the back of his car. There's no ambiguity, no way to twist his words into something innocent. He incriminates himself, again and again, without hesitation, without fear, because he never expected to be caught. Maya listens to every second, memorizes every pause, every sneer hidden in his tone, and she knows, this is it. This is what will finally break him. But Crawford doesn't go down without a fight. He shifts his strategy, paints himself as the victim, the good cop unfairly targeted by a political agenda, the man just doing his job, now hunted by radicals who want to dismantle law enforcement. He claims he was set up, that Maya provoked him, that she manipulated the situation to fit a narrative. His lawyers release edited clips of her past interviews, cut down to make her seem aggressive, hostile, dangerous. They flood social media with claims that she has a personal vendetta, that she's anti-police, that she's out for revenge, not justice. Some people buy it. Some don't. But Maya doesn't care, because she has something stronger than spin. She has proof, The recordings go public. The full, unedited files are played in court, broadcast across every major network, dissected by journalists and analysts and legal experts who all come to the same conclusion: Crawford isn't just a bad cop. He's a criminal. The room is silent as the words echo through the speakers, his own voice condemning him with every sentence. His attorneys scramble, try to object, but the damage is done. There is no walking this back. He shifts in his seat, jaw tight, shoulders rigid, the first visible crack in his armor. He's losing and he knows it. Desperation breeds recklessness. His team throws out one last attempt to regain control, one final, brutal move designed not to clear his name but to destroy hers. They leak everything. Her personal information, her address, her phone number, details about her family, her work history, old emails, anything they can twist, anything they can weaponize. They want to make her regret ever coming after him. They want to make her afraid. But they miscalculate. The public backlash is immediate, the outrage swift and unforgiving. People rally around her, drowning out the smear campaign with louder voices, stronger support, refusing to let intimidation win. The courtroom is tense, charged with the weight of everything that has led to this moment, and then the judge speaks. The case isn't over, but it's no longer just about Crawford. The investigation is expanding, digging deeper, reaching higher, unraveling the network of corruption that has kept him safe for so long. His career is crumbling, his allies are distancing themselves, his world is shrinking. But he isn't done yet. He sits there, face unreadable, but his eyes find hers, dark and steady, and she understands the message even before he speaks. This isn't over. The investigation widens, stretching far beyond Crawford, unraveling a network of power, a system designed not just to protect men like him but to enable them. It isn't just one bad cop, one corrupt officer abusing his authority, it's judges who dismissed cases before they could reach trial, prosecutors who buried evidence, senior officials who looked the other way in exchange for loyalty. Names start surfacing, people who once sat comfortably behind desks now finding themselves under scrutiny, their carefully built walls beginning to crack. What started as a single arrest spirals into something much bigger, something more dangerous, something that was never meant to be exposed. The deeper Maya digs, the clearer it becomes. Crawford was never working alone. He was a tool, a weapon wielded by people far more powerful than he ever could be. And they are watching. The first sign comes late at night, a shadow moving where there shouldn't be one, the unmistakable sensation of being followed, the feeling that every step she takes is being monitored. Then the threats escalate. Her apartment door is found slightly open when she returns one evening, nothing stolen, nothing disturbed, just enough to let her know someone was there. Her car alarm blares in the middle of the night without reason, the security footage mysteriously corrupted when she checks. Then, the moment she knew was coming finally arrives. It happens fast. A dark SUV with tinted windows, an engine revving too aggressively, headlights flaring bright as it speeds toward her just as she steps off the curb. Instinct kicks in before thought, adrenaline slamming through her veins as she throws herself back, the rush of air whipping past her as the vehicle barely misses, tires screeching against pavement before disappearing into the night. It wasn't a warning. Warnings are subtle. This was an attempt to silence her for good. But they miscalculated. The attempt on her life does exactly what they didn't want. It ignites the movement. The story breaks within hours, the footage of the near hit flooding every news outlet, fueling the fire that was already burning. The people who have been watching, waiting, hoping for justice finally step forward, their voices turning into a roar that can't be ignored. Protests erupt, streets filled with anger, chants demanding accountability, signs plastered with names of those who were silenced long before Maya ever spoke out. The pressure mounts, the walls closing in on everyone who thought they were untouchable. And then it happens. Crawford is arrested. The weight of the evidence, the testimonies from former colleagues, the recordings, the patterns of misconduct, there is no escaping it now. He is pulled from his home in the early morning hours, led away in cuffs, the very image of the authority he once abused now stripping him of his own freedom. The moment is captured on camera, broadcast live, his face twisted in rage, his eyes burning with a promise that this isn't over. His former allies scatter, distancing themselves, statements released condemning his actions, pretending they never knew what he was doing. But Maya knows better. He wasn't acting alone. He was a piece of something bigger. And then comes the final blow. Just as she thinks the battle is won, as Crawford sits in a cell awaiting trial, another name surfaces. A name bigger than him, a name with real power, a name that has been pulling the strings from the beginning. He wasn't the architect of this system, he was just the enforcer. The true mastermind is still out there, still in control, still watching. And now they know her name. Crawford is convicted. The charges stack too high, the evidence too overwhelming, the corruption too blatant for even the most well-oiled machine to cover up. He sits in a courtroom, hands cuffed, face blank, listening as the judge reads the verdict. Guilty. The word rings out, echoing through the chambers, through the streets, through the movement that his crimes helped ignite. But Maya knows the truth. One man in prison doesn't mean the system is broken. One conviction doesn't mean justice has been served. The machine that protected him is still intact, still functioning, still waiting for the moment it can tighten its grip and erase the damage his downfall has caused. The people watching, the ones who fought, the ones who marched, the ones who demanded more, they understand now. This wasn't a victory. It was a battle. And the war is far from over. Maya stands at the center of it all, no longer just an activist, no longer just a survivor of Crawford's abuse, but something more. Her name carries weight now, her voice commands attention, her actions dictate change. Offers start rolling in, agencies, organizations, committees that want her on their side, people who see her as the face of a new movement, a force too powerful to ignore. And then the one offer she never expected arrives. A position inside the very system she's been fighting against. A seat at the table where policies are shaped, where oversight is enforced, where she can do more than expose corruption, she can dismantle it from within. It's more power than she's ever had. More responsibility than she ever wanted. More risk than she's ever faced. But she takes it. And the moment she does, the retaliation begins. The system doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. It adapts. It evolves. It regroups. The same people who once dismissed her now study her every move, waiting for the moment she slips, the moment she hesitates, the moment she makes a mistake they can use to tear her down. She feels it in every meeting, in every email laced with politeness but filled with warning, in every article dissecting her past, her choices, her qualifications. They are building a case against her before she's even begun. They are preparing to neutralize her before she becomes a real threat. They are doing what they have always done, protecting themselves. But they aren't the only ones watching. The public isn't backing down. The protests haven't stopped. The people who believed in her still do, and now new stories begin to surface, new testimonies from those who were once too afraid to speak. Former officers, victims, employees from inside the department, whistleblowers with files, recordings, documents that expose more than just Crawford. This wasn't about one man. It was about a network, a structure, a legacy of corruption that stretches further than anyone imagined. And now, it's all coming apart. Maya stands on the edge of something bigger than herself, bigger than the fight she started, bigger than she ever thought possible. The weight of it presses against her, heavy with consequence, with danger, with the knowledge that once she steps forward, there is no turning back. She could stop now. She could take her position, do her job, fight within the limits they've set for her. Or she could burn the entire system to the ground. She makes her choice. She steps into the light, knowing exactly what it will cost her, knowing exactly what they will do to stop her, knowing that the war she's waging will take everything. And she doesn't care. Because she didn't come this far just to survive. She came to win.